Today we will be discussing the horrible tragedy that is the Korean War. For anyone who didn't know, we won.
Thank you, Shivani. In today's segment, we will be discussing the causes and effects of the war and the fall of China in 1953, towards the end of the war.
The Korean War was sparked by the growing concern of the spread of communism and the hopeful unification of North and South Korea. The Korean War was the first armed confrontation of the Cold War and expanded the Cold War, which up until then had generally stayed in Europe, and it was also the second time since the Second World War that two of the world's major military powers, the United States and China, have fought one another. Leading up to the Korean War, North and South Korea existed as provisional governments that were competing for control of the Korean peninsula due to the division in Korea. The fight for containment untimely led to the U.S. involvement with the Korean War. On June 25, 1950, the Korean War began when some 75,000 soldiers from the North Korean People's Army poured across the 30th parallel, the boundary between the Soviet-backed Democratic People's Republic of Korea to the north and the pro-Western Republic of Korea to the south. This invasion was the first military action of the Cold War.
The Korean War started on June 25, 1950, and ended on July 27, 1953.
It all began when North Korean troops invaded South Korea across the 30th parallel. Kim Il-sung got support from Stalin, who was the Soviet leader at the time. Both Syngman Rhee, the southern dictator, and Kim Il-sung, the northern dictator, wanted to unite the Korean peninsula, but because we did not want to give them too much power, the United States could not give weapons to South Korea. By the end of the 1950s, North Korea and South Korea had formed two separate countries. Neither the anti-communist dictator nor the communist dictator could remain on their side of the 30th parallel, which led to further border complications.
Triplett, and today we have Kevin Kim, a 78-year-old veteran from South Korea.
예. 전쟁은 저하고 제 가족에겐 되게 힘든 경험이었고요. 저 이제 전쟁이 끝나고 나서 미국으로 더 좋은 삶을 살기 위해서 이사 왔고요. 그리고 그런 끔찍한 경험 이제 하기 싫습니다.
Thank you, Kevin. Now back to you, Siobhan.
By October 1950, the UNC had more than recovered from its series of defeats in the first 2 months of the war. The UNC had all but destroyed the North Korean army and was pursuing it deep into its homeland. Advanced elements of the UNC were dispersed and overconfident nearing the Yalu River. In October 1950, the Chinese People's Volunteers secretly moved across the Yalu into the central mountains of North Korea. In later attacks, the Chinese recaptured Sewol.
And now we have video from the Korean War.
In Korea, United Nations troops push on in the cautious advance against the communists. An advance whose purpose, General Ridgway states, is not to seize ground, but to wipe out the enemy. Marines came back into action only recently from the Hungnam beachhead. Despite obstacles, United Nations forces drive on to the 38th parallel, border of North Korea.
In July 1951, President Truman and his new military commanders started peace negotiations at Panmunjom. After more than 2 years of negotiations, the adversaries signed an armistice on July 27, 1953. The agreement allowed prisoners of war to stay where they liked, drew a new boundary near the 30th parallel that gave South Korea an extra 1,500 square miles of territory, and created a 2-mile-wide demilitarized zone that still exists today.
In the Korean War, the U.S. spent $67 billion and sent over 90% of their troops over to aid South Korea.
Not only was the financial part of it really hard, the human cost was hard as well. Over 36,000 Americans lost their lives, along with 673,000 South Koreans. The North Koreans lost more than 200,000, and the Chinese lost 145,000. Millions of civilians on both sides lost their lives as well.
The United States did benefit from the Korean War. The Korean War boosted GDP growth through government spending, which in turn constrained investment and consumption. While taxes were raised significantly to finance the war, the Federal Reserve followed an anti-inflationary policy. Though there was a large increase in prices at the outset of the war, price and wage controls ultimately stabilized prices by the end of the war. Consumption and investment continued to grow after the war, but below the trend rate prior to the war. Despite devastating losses and lack of a clear victory, the Korean War was not a complete failure for the United States. The U.S. was able to demonstrate a key element of the containment policy by halting the spread of communism in Asia. Proving its dedication to the containment policy was possibly the greatest victory for the United States. The Soviet Union and China recognized that America was serious about stopping the spread of communism and that it was willing to pay great cost to confront it.
In conclusion, the Korean War was very devastating.
Its implications are felt by many around the world today.
So thank you for joining us for this segment, and have a nice day.